Have you ever wondered how Canada, the country known for its monumental natural beauty and cultural diversity, came to be? Well, it's a tale as vast as the nation itself, filled with intriguing twists and turns. From the early indigenous peoples to the European settlers, from rebellious colonies to a unified, independent country, Canada's history is a rich tapestry of events and cultures. Its story is one of transformation, resilience, and evolution. Join us on this journey through time to unravel the tapestry of Canada's past. Long before the arrival of Europeans, diverse indigenous nations and tribes populated what we now call Canada. For thousands of years, these native inhabitants lived in harmony with the land. They developed rich cultures, complex societies, and intricate systems of governance. From the coastal tribes of the Pacific Northwest with their towering totem poles and potlatch ceremonies, to the nomadic plains tribes with their buffalo hunts and teepees, to the woodland tribes of the east with their long houses and wampum belts, every tribe had its own distinct culture, language, and way of life. Contrary to the common misconception, these tribes were not primitive or simplistic. They were highly sophisticated societies that traded, negotiated treaties, and waged wars. They had deep spiritual traditions with ceremonies and rituals that connected them to the earth, the sky, and all living things. They were the original stewards of this land, living in balance with the natural world. Then, in the late 15th century, European explorers began to arrive. First came John Cabot, an Italian navigator sailing under the English flag. He landed on the shores of Newfoundland in 1497, claiming the land for England. But it was the French explorer Jacques Cartier who made the most significant explorations. On his 3 voyages between 1534 and 1542, Cartier explored the St. Lawrence River, establishing France's claim to what is now Quebec. The arrival of these Europeans marked the beginning of a new era. They came in search of riches, new trade routes, and territories to claim for their home countries. But their arrival brought disease, displacement, and disruption to the indigenous people. The Europeans saw the land as a vast wilderness to be conquered and exploited. But to the indigenous people, it was their home, a sacred place filled with the spirits of their ancestors. The clash of these two worldviews led to centuries of conflict, cultural exchange, and transformation. The arrival of these explorers set the stage for a period of conflict and change. The 16th century marked the beginning of Europe's colonization efforts in Canada. The era was characterized by a rush of European powers, each eager to stake their claim on the land. The French and British, in particular, established strongholds that would shape the course of Canada's history. The French were the first to lay roots. In the early 17th century, Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec City, marking the birth of New France. This new colony, with its fur trade and Jesuit missions, became a beacon of French culture in the New World. Yet, the French weren't alone for long. Across the Atlantic, the British had their eyes set on the prize too. They made their mark with the establishment of Newfoundland and later, the Hudson Bay Company, laying claim to vast territories. The British colonies, with their emphasis on trade and settlement, became a powerful force to reckon with. As the French and British colonies grew side by side, so did their rivalry. This competition wasn't just about land or resources, it was a clash of cultures, of ideologies, and of ambitions. Both powers sought to expand their influence, often at the expense of the other. This era of colonization wasn't without its repercussions. The indigenous populations, the original stewards of the land, found themselves caught in the crossfire. The arrival of foreign settlers disrupted their way of life, brought unfamiliar diseases, and ignited conflicts over territory and resources. Yet amid the turmoil, there were instances of cooperation and mutual learning. The indigenous population shared their knowledge of the land and its resources, vital to the survival of the early settlers. On the other hand, the Europeans introduced new technologies and trade practices. But the struggle for control between the British and French was far from over. Their rivalry would continue, tensions escalating until they reached a boiling point in the mid-18th century. The stage was set for a conflict of epic proportions, a war that would decide the future of Canada. The struggle for control between the British and French would eventually culminate in the 7 Years' War. This was a turning point in the history of Canada, a chapter that we will delve into in our next scene. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 marked the end of French rule, making Canada a British colony. With this significant shift in power, the landscape of Canada began to change drastically. The British Empire had a profound influence on the country's political, social, and economic fabric, shaping Canada into the nation we know today. One of the major consequences of British rule was the influx of loyalists, American colonists who remained loyal to the Crown during the American Revolution. These loyalists, disenchanted by the revolutionary fervor in the 13 colonies, migrated north to Canada. This mass migration not only significantly increased the English-speaking population in Canada, but also led to the creation of the provinces of New Brunswick and Ontario. The American Revolution also had a significant impact on Canada in a broader sense. The revolutionary ideas of self-governance and independence began to permeate Canadian society, particularly among the English-speaking population. This sparked a series of rebellions in the 1830s, prompting the British government to re-evaluate its colonial policies. In response, the British passed the Act of Union in 1840, which united Upper and Lower Canada into the single province of Canada. This was a crucial step towards Canadian self-rule. The Act of Union also introduced the concept of responsible government, which meant that the executive branch of government had to have the confidence of the legislative branch, a key principle in today's democratic governments. But the real game-changer was the Constitution Act of 1867. This act, also known as the British North America Act, united the provinces of Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia into a single federation, the Dominion of Canada. The Constitution Act granted Canada a great deal of autonomy, allowing it to govern itself in domestic matters, while Britain retained control over foreign affairs and defense. Despite being a British colony, Canada was on its way to becoming its own entity. The seeds of modern Canada were sown during this period of British rule, setting the stage for the country's eventual independence in the 20th century. The British influence is still palpable today, reflected in Canada's parliamentary system, legal framework, and even in the Queen's role as the official head of state. The 20th century was a time of transformation for Canada. As the century unfolded, Canada found itself on the world stage, playing significant roles in the two world wars. The nation stood shoulder to shoulder with other allied powers, bolstering its international reputation. In the First World War, the Battle of Vimy Ridge marked a pivotal moment, as Canada's military prowess was recognized globally. Then, in the Second World War, the country's contributions ranged from the Battle of the Atlantic to the D-Day invasion, further underscoring Canada's growing prominence. But the 20th century was not just about wars. It was a period of transition as Canada moved from being a British colony to an independent nation. The Statute of Westminster in 1931 granted Canada legislative independence, but it wasn't until 1982 that the country gained full sovereignty with the patriation of the Constitution. Amidst these political changes, Canada was also experiencing social transformations. In the mid-20th century, the country made a bold move by introducing universal healthcare, a policy that has become a defining feature of Canadian identity. This was a landmark achievement, making quality healthcare accessible to all citizens, regardless of their economic status. The century also saw the introduction of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982. This legal document, part of the Constitution Act, enshrined fundamental rights and liberties, reinforcing Canada's commitment to uphold human rights and democracy. Canada's transformation in the 20th century was not only political and social, but also cultural. The nation began to embrace its multicultural diversity, fostering an environment of inclusivity and acceptance. This cultural shift has played a significant role in shaping Canada's national identity, making it a mosaic of cultures from around the world. These events have shaped Canada into the dynamic multicultural nation it is today. Canada's history is a complex and fascinating journey. It's a tapestry woven with threads of diverse cultures, struggles for autonomy, and triumphs of unity. We've journeyed together through a rich narrative that spans thousands of years, beginning with the indigenous societies that first called this land home. We delved into the era of European exploration, when adventurers from across the sea arrived, forever altering the course of history. Their quest for resources and territory led to the colonization of Canada, a period marked by conflict and change. The indigenous societies faced unprecedented challenges, yet their resilience shaped the cultural landscape of Canada in profound and lasting ways. We then navigated the turbulent waters of British rule, a time that saw Canada transform from a collection of colonies to a federation. This period gave birth to modern Canada, a nation defined by its commitment to democracy, justice, and multiculturalism. Our journey concluded in the 20th century, a time of rapid change and growth for Canada. It was an era that brought both global conflicts and immense technological advancements. Through it all, Canada emerged as a strong, diverse, and vibrant nation. The history of Canada is not just a series of events, but a story of people, their struggles, their achievements, and their dreams. It's a story that continues to unfold, shaped by the actions and aspirations of its citizens. Understanding this history helps us appreciate the diverse and vibrant culture that makes Canada truly unique.